Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back again with some more lore. In the wacky world of Warhammer 40K there are many stories. Some of them are about the simple guardsmen trying to make it in life, others about the defiant spacemen shouting curses into the aether, and even more about the mysterious Necrons and the Eldari and their legacy of war and death. Yes, while some of these are well known to us, there are many that are minor and that fall in between the cracks. Yet very rarely, these minor stories contain dramatic effects. And the consequences and ramifications of these events will be felt throughout not just the entirety of a single faction, but the entirety of the universe. So join me today as we cover 3 different stories, from the machinations of Bile to the legacy of Sanguinius, all the way to the sons of Malice. As in today's Warhammer 40K lore video, ladies and gentlemen, we found out why is nobody talking about these 3 stories, and why you should be. Also, real quick before this video starts, thank you guys so much on all the support we got on the last video. It means the absolute world to me. You guys are fucking killing it. I love y'all. Mwah. As per usual, sources are listed over here. Have fun with them. The first bit of lore we will be covering today comes from the book Manflayer, and it is part of the trilogy of Fabius Bile. Essentially, this book takes place after Fabius Bile had escaped into Comora. Now, everyone was expecting we were going to find out what he did there, but in this book we take a look at the aftermath. Basically, Bile got into an homunculi coven, and of course they were able to teach him everything that he wanted to know. The problem is though, Bile kinda dipped, and the homunculi are rather pissed about this. This book basically deals with the aftermath of that, and seeing what exactly Bile will do, and how he will take the story forward, and ultimately what his decisions will be, and what he himself will end up doing. Now, whilst the story in of itself is rather compelling, what we want to look at is just exactly what Bile created while he was there, and just what exactly it means for Warhammer 40k. So as you can imagine, Bile must have created some very nasty shit in Comora, and this is 100% true. But rather than looking at a whole example of everything that he did, there was one thing in particular that surprised even the Drukhari. A moment later, the stink of rotting meat reached across the distance and struck Orlando like a blow. The prow of the bark breached the chemical murk, revealing a fleshy stalactite jutting from the underside of the city, the Tower of Flesh. It was larger than the Eyries of High Comora, stretching down into the dark reaches of the webway like an overturned mountain. A mountain made of meat and muscle, a leviathan of flesh and bone. It was a pallid bastion, clinging to its perch by wriggling sinews, the length of a frigate. A web of ligaments stretched around it, snaring the many and various spiked protrusions that lined the city's belly. The sheer wrongness of it struck him. He thought himself jaded to such horrors, but the eye was full to bursting of nightmares. He'd seen worlds made from the bodies of dead monsters, and witnessed the tortures of the damned. But this was something else again. There was a cruel pragmatism to it. There was no joy here. It had been constructed by a mind more concerned with efficiency and practical application than pain and suffering. The mind of Fabius Bile. Somehow, that made it worse. As always, the sight of it left him momentarily dumb. Beautiful. Whatever his flaws, Fabius knew there was beauty in efficiency. No artistic pretensions for him. Now there was a Monkai who had a proper grasp of biomathematics. If only he'd been a Drukhari. If only. What a rack he would have made. What a homunculus. The Hexarches seemed to have felt the same way. They only glared at him. Hexarches allowed his infatuation to cloud his judgment. I knew Fabius was trouble from the start. However interesting he might have been, it wasn't worth the difficulties he's caused us, and is still causing us. The bark had slowed its descent. Bridge-like strands of muscle connected to floating buoys drifted all along the tower's length. The bark drew close to one, and slowed as the pilot guided the vessel into the berth. Docking clamps extended with such grating screech. Diome rose and beckoned Orlando to follow. Welcome home, Orlando. Hexarches stalked across the docking bay of the Tower of Flesh, gnawing at his own fingers in frustration. The bay stank of spoiled meat, and the sound of insects rose from its rugose surface. Metal gantries had been spiked into its length, and a bloody ichor seeped from the connection points. These shivered as the bark that had transported him hither departed. An awful rasping sound filled the air like distant thunder. He sighed in pleasure, as the noise enfolded him in its comforting rhythms. The tower was in constant agony, feeding its inhabitants with pain, even as they carved new runnels in its quivering innards. Pershing had been depressingly resolute, so had the others. For such long-lived creatures, Many Drukhari were incredibly short-sighted. Some of it was his own fault. The tinkering he had done to them. The tweaking. He'd made Savla and Alvara, yes, Peshing as well. Impudent and ambitious. He'd never considered that it might come back to bite him. He stroked the contours of his mask, feeling it as if they were his own skin. His face was little more than a memory. He couldn't recall the last time he'd seen it. Considered or not, the deed was done. He had to adapt or perish. The story of his race, in a nutshell. For the moment, however, he was home, and that was enough. Everything smelled of rotten meat, and his bare flesh was kissed by the humid air that sank thick in the spongy corridors. The floor beneath him was solid, but hideously soft, and straighted with pulsing veins. The walls too were marked with them, dark runnels branching in 1,000 directions from the inside. It was clear to even the untrained eye that the tower of flesh had been grown rather than constructed. There were no joints, no sutures, no scars save for those inflicted by the myriad dangers of its precarious perch. The walls and the corridors were buttresses with thick knots of brambly bone, as hard as ceramite, but impossibly flexible. Webs of neutral matter stretched across ceilings, or crept along walls like unintended veins, and you could see flickers of cerebral activity in their opalescent lengths, like sparks from a dying fire. The internal corridors were made from hauled-out bones, and the gantries and walkways of the open areas were crafted from muscle tissue and ligaments. The air throbbed with heat, and there was a distant quacking thud, and the rhythmic beat of an immense heart. Racks and slave creatures were everywhere, carrying out the whims of their masters. Homunculi gathered in ventures to debate the merits of their new discoveries with one another, or test the strength of some new slave form against a variety of obstacles, both living and otherwise. They stopped to watch him as he passed. He felt their gazes follow him, and heard the snatches of murmured conversation. He wanted to stop, to confront them, to shriek his rage to the rafters. They didn't understand. The fools. They hadn't seen what he'd seen. They had no vision. But instead, he ignored them, as a proper master must. Let them talk. Let them murmur, plot, and scheme. They would fall silent when they finally had Fabius in hand. They would choke on their own mutterings then. He would see to it personally. Sometimes he wished the 13 Scars were merely an orderly coven like the Black Descent. There, the secret masters imposed their authority in unquestionable fashion, but the Scars were younger, more raucous. Debate was their meat, and conversation was their drink, and both were in plenty supply. That was initially what attracted him to their ranks. The other covens were so hidebound, so narrow-minded. He'd hoped to find like minds then. Later, he'd hoped to mold them, to shape the coven in his image, much as Fabius had done with his followers. He ground his teeth, annoyed with himself for making the comparison. He came to a wide, colloquial archway. He extended his hand, and a plop of meat stretched from the archway to meet it. It enfolded his hand with a wet inhalation and quivered. Then it released him with a plop and retracted. The archway convulsed and split, permitting entrance. The chamber was beyond that of an irregular shape, branching off into strange edifices of space. It resembled an aortic valve, if somewhat distended and convoluted. There were great mangroves of muscle tissue that stretched through the interior here and there. The webs of tissue contracted, and the aperture sealed itself behind him with a squirming sound. Safe in the confines of his private lab, he allowed himself a soft sigh of discontent. Then, something laughed. So from that description, we can see exactly what Bile had made. A literal Chaos Titan, but in the form of flesh. Now, I use the term Titan because it's described as a very large and imposing structure. We also know that it's capable of battle, and that it walks on 2 legs. It's possible it could be some type of weird hybrid battleship nonsense, but the idea of a fleshy Chaos Titan really just does seem like something that Bile would bite at. But regardless of what form factor it chooses, whether or not it looks like a Titan, that's up to debate. What isn't, though, is the fact that it fights like one. Later on, we'll see that when this big chunky bastard gets unleashed, it is able to counter and fight several Warhound Class Titans, and actually wins. And that's the scary part. This thing is at the very least an Imperator level of destructive capability, and there's even rumors that it could even surpass it. Bile created a Flesh Titan, a construct made not of metal, but rather of blood and of sinew. Now, well, yes, of course, in actual practicality of combat, this is maddening dangerous. I could go on and on talking about how the fact that this thing grows its own ammunition, how it can just repair its own skin, and how it being biological means that many electric-based weapons don't exactly counter it well. Because when your weapons are designed to fight against metal and shields, having a giant slab of flesh, well, your anti-void shield weapons aren't exactly the perfect counter to that now, are they? But rather, what I want to point to is what it is on the inside. As we can see, this thing is 100% purely and utterly biological in nature. For Hexares, the Dark Elder homunculus, to enter, it literally sucks in his hand, reads his DNA, and then it opens the gate. This thing is alive. We know that it feels pain. To kill a Titan, you need two things. You either need a Titan, or you have to get on the inside. Titans, much like tanks in our own world, are very, very dangerous weapons, but they are incredibly vulnerable without any supporting infantry. We have several accounts of Space Marines, particularly Terminators, entering into Titans and absolutely destroying them by simply breaching into their legs, slaughtering the crew and the guards, and then planting demolition charges on important places. Titans are heavily at risk of boarding. That's why most Titan formations have several contingents of armed men to keep them at bay, be they Chaos Thralls or Mechanicus Scutari. This particular thing here, this monstrosity of flesh-made manifest, basically eliminates that possibility. Because if you get a bunch of Space Marines in this thing, this living monstrosity will literally change its flesh composition to destroy you. Oh, you're about to breach a door with the breaching charge? Nope, the door goes away. The breaching charge is swallowed. Then all of a sudden, the walls close in around you, like the stomach contracting around a piece of food. This thing is a living entity, meaning that if it wanted to, it could easily flood a passageway with stomach acid. All-seeing eyes could monitor you from place to place, regardless of how many times you try and scramble the systems. Teeth could emerge out of nowhere to chomp at bits and pieces, removing you utterly. And worst of all, this thing is alive, meaning that whatever you hurt it, it will remember, and it can make the ending of your life beyond nightmarish. We know for a fact that whatever this thing is, even the Dark Elder are like, whoa, well done, Bile. This is a monstrosity that is capable of not only destroying other battle titans, but entire formations. And that's even the most scariest thing about this thing. The most scariest part of it is that it's still growing. This thing was grown, and it's still growing. It's still being improved upon. It's still developing. So in theory, if now it might be the size of an Imperator Titan, well, what about in a couple hundred years? It is, in my opinion, that this thing is the brother to the Castigator, as well as the Castigator was the first, the truest, and the father of the Titans. And perhaps this is a bastardized uncle, with all the power and might of an iron hull, yet with the sick warp-based twists and machinations of a flesh puppet made manifest. Bile is a horrid individual, but as the Drukhari said, he knows how to do fleshmancy, and he does fleshmancy quite well. And as to why people should know this exists, this is a literal flesh titan created by the greatest Chaos Space Marine apothecary ever that was given to the Dark Elder. The Dark Elder have a flesh titan that in theory could grow as large as a planet just chilling in Comora. Excuse me, my dude. How is no one covering this fucking flesh titan, my guy? But from the flesh titans of Comora, we then go on to the demonic incursions of the blessed sons of the angel. So we find ourselves with Asteroth the Grim. For those who don't know, Asteroth the Grim is known as the Redeemer. He's essentially the High Executioner of the Blood Angels. But specifically, he's meant to execute brothers of the Blood Angels who have fallen to the Black Rage, essentially a mercy killing of sort. And he arrives at the world of Dulcis. It is believed that this world is under the threat of demonic incursion, as the psychics on the planet have been going absolutely haywire. The black ships at the Athanama Sakana are trying their best to keep everything in order, but according to the Red Wings, a newly found chapter reinforced with several Primaris Marines, they're not exactly doing a good job. This Space Marine chapter suffered heavily during the assault on Baal by the Tyranids, and even now, after recovering with the Primaris, they end up losing a couple down on the planet. It's basically a big shit show. So Asteroth the Grim comes over and he's like, alright, what's going on? Because he was drawn here by the sense of the Black Rage. Something brought him here. Something is up. And as he enters the planet, he is joined together with elements of the Red Wings, as well as his own company of men. And as they fight through, they find the several bodies of the Space Marine Primaris, and they realize that Primaris are actually being afflicted with the Black Rage. But many Primaris don't know what the Black Rage is, as they've only recently been reunited with the other sons of Sanguinius. But even worse than that, they realize that the psychic nonsense is being caused not necessarily by a demonic incursion, but by the enslavers. the ancient enemy of the Space Marines from the Great Crusade. These terrible alien monstrosities are able to mind control humanity, and anything with a brain really. Thus the Space Marines are meant to engage in deep-seated hard-fighting combat with them. They end up finding the spawning pools of the enslavers and destroy them. Throughout the battle, Asteroth the Grim takes a beating, and his armor is damaged, forcing him to abandon it. With naught but his power axe in hand, he ends up finding out what really happened to the Primaris Space Marines. Whilst the enslavers had killed some of their number, it had actually been a black rage-induced Primaris Marine, known as Lieutenant Jabril, who actually had slain most of his brothers in a black rage, believing them to be Horus. From here, Asteroth was forced to fight off his brothers, who had fallen to the black rage, but as always, he was careful, for something did not feel right. Asteroth fought the lost Space Marine up the hill, cutting at him carefully, each blow of his axe carving away pieces of his armor. It would take time to drain his strength, but the Redeemer was cautious. He was without armor, and the Primaris was stronger. Their Marsborn might, amplified by their rage, posed a danger to him. The storm raged. The ridgetop was bare of trees. So prominent above the landscape it attracted more than its share of lightning. Anything that grew there would be hit and die. He looked up at the cliff, and the cliff was only 40 feet high. They were halfway up, winding around the slope at its side. Another factor to be careful of. A flash of lightning on the Red Wing's armored nameplate revealed his identity as Didran. Though Asteroth had guessed it already from the list Lamarak had given him, so many names had been entrusted to him. So many lives that needed ending. The warriors of the Red Wings were all beyond help, too deep in the memories of Sanguinius' death to serve in one final battle as members of the Death Company. They must instead be killed. And that was Asteroth's role, and his burden. The bringer of mercy, the ending of pain. Didran had lost his helm, and his face was contorted with rage. The awful changes that the curse wrought upon the blood was already twisting his features into something inhuman, while his soul underwent the most sacred end, an end that one of the blood could hope for. His body took on the aspect of a beast. Didran was wordless, as the lost often were, but Asteroth spoke softly to him.
Duty is our burden, but it is our nature to serve, and should be accepted gladly. Sanguinius wrote that of all things, duty is the most sweet. Yours is at an end. Rejoice, for you are with our Father.
His words did nothing to soothe the warrior's savage temper, but they were not said to calm. They were said to prepare his soul for the end. Asteroth readied his axe for the final blow, seeing that the time approached, when a voice called out through the rumble of thunder and the crack of lightning striking trees.
I see you, brother! I see you! Come to my sword and give answer for your treachery!
The sky sheared white. Jadriel stood upon the edge of the low cliff, silhouetted against the storm's fury. Didran lunged for Asteroth in his moment of distraction. Asteroth sidestepped. He brought his axe down in horizontal sweep and shattered Didran's backpack. The blade continued into his spine, breaking it. Didran fell face down into the mud.
I bring you mercy. Be at peace, son of the blood.
No! You have slain your last blood angel, Horus. Face someone who might best you, or name yourself coward, and fall upon the Emperor's mercy.
I am not your enemy, brother Jadriel. Look into your heart, and remember who you are. I shall return you to your brothers, so that you may serve one final time.
You shall not turn me to your cause. It has been tried and failed. Face me now and receive your price for treachery.
Rain bounced off Didran's armor. Asteroth looked up to Jadriel on the rock, another that was too far gone, but this would be dangerous. That was his judgment. Jadriel was armored, still in a position of a measure of his faculties, and was a renowned fighter. Asteroth hefted his axe in both hands. It was heavy with the lives it had harvested, and yet it was not sated. It hungered for more.
Then await me, and I shall bring you mercy.
Jadriel stood back from the brink. Asteroth walked up to the top of the ridge. At the summit of the hill he was broad and rounded, making a space some 50 yards across. They were exposed to the storm here. Lightning cracked down dangerously close, earthing itself in the upper branches of the trees, poking over the summit's edge. The stone was soft, blending itself into clays, and the ground was thus made treacherous. Jojo waited for Asteroth at the center of this natural arena.
So it comes to this, Horus. You against I. Why did you do it? Why did you turn against our father?
Asteroth had heard similar questions many times before, and never answered them. Dante and the others might have felt the touch of Sanguinius, but not he. All he saw was the madness their father's curse brought to them. There was no response that could find favor with those in the grip of rage, no matter how cogent they might seem. They were not here, they were not themselves.
Those days are long done, my brother. Set down your weapons. Your war days are over. I come to bring you mercy.
Jadriel tore off his helm and threw it down, showing a face ravaged by sorrow.
Like you brought mercy to Istvan, and Beta Garmin, and to Terra, and Laferis, and to the people of the Imperium!
Jadriel carried no ranged weapons, but he pulled free his power sword from his sheath and touched its activation stud. It burst into a display of lightning to match that raging across the sky.
You have no mercy in you, only pride and arrogance. For your self-regard, you have ruined us all.
Brother, wait! You are not Sanguinius.
The time for waiting is done. The time for vengeance is at hand.
He flew at Asteroth, feet kicking up clods of crumbling mudstone. Lightning roared earthwards and blasted steaming holes in the other side of the hilltop. Flickering tons of electricity crackled all over the sky, and the rain pounded down, bringing Asteroth's long black hair into weeping strands. Asteroth stood his ground, axe ready. He ignited his own power field at the last moment, intercepting Jadriel's string with a short block. The blades met and boomed with technology's thunder, far sharper and more aggressive than that of the storm.
In the name of Sanguinius, Father to us all, I come to heal your pain.
Jadriel shouted, his face colored in a deepening red, his fangs flashed in lightning.
Liar! You are the bringer of pain.
Again, Jadriel charged, bearing down on Asteroth like a feral world knight, jousting at the lists. They met again. Jadriel's sword sped up and then blocked down as he passed, seeking Asteroth's primary heart. The Redeemer blocked both blows in short, using precise movements that called for more thunder from the weapons. The storm crashed in answer. Jadriel cut short his runs past and pivoted, sword spinning, cutting high and then low in a weave of blue sparks. Asteroth bided his time, catching the blows with his shaft axe and then its head, deflecting them away, but Jadriel pushed him, advancing all the time, his boots carving deeper imprints into the hilltop that filled instantly with rain. Another lightning bolt slammed down, and then another, and another, and another. The ground steamed under the storm's attack. Jadriel pressed on, driving Asteroth towards the cliff top. He was ranting now, losing coherency, missing elements of his own life into the memories of Sanguinius.
I have come to ease your suffering.
There has been blood. There has been nothing but blood and death. I have been an instrument of destruction. I have been a blade rarely sheathed. Why? Why?
I have come to end your pain.
Asteroth pivoted back as Jadriel raised his blade to strike, hooking the beard of his axe over the sword and twisting it hard. Caught between the haft and the axe head, the sword broke with a great emission of power that staggered both of them. Asteroth's bare skin steamed. Jadriel leapt forward, grabbing the axe in both hands and wrestling the Redeemer for it. Jadriel's greater strength came into its own, and Asteroth had to fight with all his might to retain his weapon. Jadriel aimed blows with his feet and knees at Asteroth's lower half, forcing the Redeemer to step carefully to avoid them. Together they wrestled on the brink of the cliff, the storm blazing with growing intensity. The soul of Jadriel's Sabaton raked down upon Asteroth's shin, scraping the skin off an exposing bone. Asteroth gritted his teeth against the pain, and replied with a headbutt directly into the center of Jadriel's face. His nose exploded under the impact, and the rain ran spiked with blood. Jadriel staggered. Asteroth pushed his advantage, releasing the axe with his right hand, and driving his fist into Jadriel's broken nose. The bone cracked wetly again. Asteroth gripped the collar of Jadriel's armor and dragged him, attempting to use the Primer Spaceman's weight against him and bring him to the ground. Jadriel wiggled out of the throw, grabbed Asteroth's hand and turned the limb, forcing the Redeemer back. Jadriel shoved hard and wrenched the Executioner's axe from his grasp. Asteroth stumbled, falling to one knee, his blood washed into the earth.
You betrayed us! You betrayed all of us!
He raised the axe high, then lightning slashed across the sky, connecting with the axe. Electricity raced through Jadriel's armor, burning out its systems. Energy surged to Asteroth as the power raced up, threatening to render him unconscious. But he staggered up from the smoking ground. As Jadriel fell forward, the lieutenant rose on all fours, but then fell down again, managing to roll onto his back. His face was badly burned by the lightning strike.
I come to bring you mercy,
grunted Asteroth. He fetched his axe and stood over the fallen lieutenant.
You betrayed us, and now
At last, you use the power of your false gods against me.
His lips were scorched, his words poorly formed, but there was no denying the hatred within them.
No false gods, brother. Only angels. Sanguinius watches over all his sons. He awaits for you now.
He brought the axe down. The power field was burned out, but the blade was still sharp, and split Jadriel's skull perfectly down the center. Asteroth let his axe drop and bowed his head. His duty was discharged. Another loyal son of the blood was slain at his hand. Another song of suffering silenced. Soon another would come, and then another. But for that moment, there was peace to be found in the storm's fury.
I commend your soul to the great angel. May you find reward at his side.
In answer, the sky flashed and crashed one more time before the storm moved away to other places, for the storm of the blood had passed. So aside from that being an absolutely epic fight, two sons of the blood, one consumed by rage, one fighting against it, clashing with blade and axe upon a mountaintop wreathed in lightning. Honestly, it's like one of those old-fashioned stories you hear from like the ancient texts of the Romans or the Greeks about the gods clashing. That shit is fucking epic. But now, y'all might be asking me, hey Brad, this is a really epic story, but what's so special about it? And, unlike in Fabius, where it's rather obvious, this is what might be. Remember how I mentioned before there was a lot of psychic nonsense that was going on with this world, and how this supposed psychic backlash had caused the outbreak of the Black Rage within the Primaris Space Marines. Some will claim that this is the work of the Enslavers, because the Enslavers could indeed access the minds of Astartes. They had done it most notably with the Ultramarines way back when. But here is my thing. The Enslavers had been dealt with, yet the Black Rage was still present. Now you may say, oh well Brad, these guys were already with the Black Rage beforehand. And whilst that may be true, we know for a fact that the Sergeant of the Red Wings fell to the Black Rage after all of that nonsense with the Enslavers was done with. Meaning that there was still something guiding them. For those who don't know about Asteroth, he is said to be guided by the spirit of Sanguinius. As I mentioned in my previous Blood Angels videos, there is an issue with the Blood Angels as they fight for the soul of the Legion. Basically on Baal, for time immemorial, there have been two gods fighting. One an angel of blood, one an angel of darkness. And this is essentially the fight for the soul of the Blood Angels. It is believed that there is this evil Blood Angel who is trying to get them to fall to the Black Rage. But moreover, there is also a good blood angel, the Angel of Gold, known as the Sanguinor, who fights for them. This is all covered in Mephiston's book, by the way. We can see that Asteroth was guided here by a spirit of Sanguinius. He saw this, he felt this in his spirit, and he was moved to come here by Sanguinius. Or rather, by the Gilded Angel. So it's very plausible that either this Black Angel was trying to get gnawing at the Primaris. Because again, the Primaris did not know about the specifics of the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. Therefore, they did not know how to counter it. It stated specifically that these Space Marines, the new Primaris, did not know about the 5 virtues and the 5 pieces. These were incredibly important practices that were said to maintain and mediate the spirit, soul, and mind of a Blood Angel. These were established by Sanguinius himself when he reformed his legion. These Primaris, they don't know that, they don't follow that. Meaning that for all cases and purposes, these Primaris are far more susceptible to the mental assault than a normal Blood Angel. In other words, it is very possible that this Black Angel possessed Lieutenant Jabril, meaning that the Black Angel would have nearly had a champion to fight with. As I mentioned before with Mephiston, the Sanguinor is the avatar of the Gilded Angel, but the Black Angel at the moment does not have an avatar. It is stated that if the Black Angel gets an avatar, he will overpower the Sanguinor and thus the Gilded Spirit. Meaning that in this context, it is very much possible we saw Asteroth the Grim fighting against a personification of the darkness of the Blood Angels. Not just the Black Rage, but the Black Rage God, the Black Rage Demon. And I really do indeed believe that that's the case. Because Asteroth basically lost that fight. If it was not for the lightning strike, I'm just saying, divine intervention anyone? Perhaps the Golden Angel was the one who delivered that to Asteroth, allowing him to stop this carnage. Again, the Blood Angels have this whole subtle subplot going on about the fighting for the soul of their legion. Will they become Sanguinius, or will they become the Revenant Legion? Again, there are so many clues that point to Lieutenant Jabril not just being under the influence of the Black Rage, but rather the Black God, the Black Angel. Again, it's a really cool idea, and I love these little bits and pieces, and it makes sense. You get Asteroth the Grim and Ophiston, two blood angels who are far more on the darker side, but are kind of like tragic heroes. So it makes sense that they would fight against these type of demonic foes. But from the bloodied sons of the angel, battling of gilded and sable, let's talk about the sons of a different god. One that is rather malicious. So this is the topic that actually inspired me to make this video, because a mate of mine and I were talking, and like, I can't believe that this happened because this is really fucking big. So basically all of this comes from the book The Labyrinth. Well, book, it's a short story. And it talks about some aspirants who want to enter the Doomed Ones. The Doomed Ones are basically the sons of Malice. Malice being the 5th Chaos God, previously known as Malal. Now that story is a whole nother thing in of itself, and we'll talk about that in another video at some time. But basically, you have these renegade space marine, and they want to join the Doomed Ones. They wouldn't become the sons of Malice proper. But to do so, they then need to pass through the Labyrinth, that being a massive spaceship that serves as both the home base as well as trial place of the sons of Malice. But here's the catch. Only one of them can survive, and they will essentially become the next son. But as the group ends up towards the end of the trial, they get a lot more than they bargained for. The passageway gradually turned and widened into a dark hall. Deep shadows cloistered it on either side. Great statues rose upwards from the dark, ancient sentinels that lined the hall. But Invictus paid them no heed, for up ahead was a much more majestic sight. A great portal stood at the far end of the massive chamber, fulgurating blue disc dancing up and down its length, tempting Invictus, beckoning him ever closer. But between he and it was the sprinting form of a gun, way ahead, ready to claim the prize that was rightfully his.
Agon!
Ganaris cried. As he neared the portal, Agon stopped, slowly turning with a smile.
I am truly sorry, my brothers, but it seems I must leave you. I wish you...
Something streaked from the dark, cutting Agon off mid-sentence. A huge chitin claw, ancient and battered, gripped around him on the waist, lifting him up 5 meters into the air, blood gurgling from his mouth as the claw squeezed tight. 2 halves of his body fell to the ground, in it spilling onto the hard steel decking. Then it walked from out of the shadows. 4 massive limbs carried its great bulk forward. It was a mass of flesh and claws, steel and metal. Plates cauterized into a body of seething blubber. 2 great claws reached out into the fore and clacked together menacingly. But it was the head that was the most hideous thing. A twisted, bloated replica of a face that once might have been a human, but now it was so savage and malign as to be unrecognizable. As Invictus watched in horror, the great jaws opened and bellowed forth its incessant call.
Let me out!
It screamed, filling the hall with its ear-slitting roar. It was now all too clear. This was no ancient war cry Invictus had been hearing. It was simply the maddening ranting of an insane mutant, caged for centuries, and left to the mercy of the warp's corrupting influence. And now it was the only thing standing in the way of victory. Ganaris was the first to move, stepping forward and unleashing out a flame that consumed the monster's head. When the inferno subsided, Invictus could see that the flames had not even left a mark on the beast's head and carapace. He raised his bolt pistol, firing at the creature's eye, but the explosive rounds did nothing but cause it annoyance. It roared once more, repeating its interminable request for release, before stumping forward on those thick, hideous limbs.
I only have 1 shot left. You must make this last round count. I understand, brother.
Gyaras replied, grasping his flamer by the stock. The beast opened its maw, ready to bellow at them again. Then Gyaras took his chance, flinging the flamer into its gaping jaws. Invictus raised the bolt, waiting for his moment. He had only a split second, a small window in which to fire, but he was a veteran of the Sons of Malice, a warrior unmatched on the field. A split second was more than he could ever need. An explosive round pierced the Promethean canister just as the flamer entered the behemoth's mouth, igniting the liquid flame within it. It exploded, blowing the top of the mutant's head clean off, silencing it forever. For a few seconds, the body of the twisted juggernaut staggered on its 4 limbs, uncertain of whether it was dead or not. Then, like a tower suddenly robbed of its foundations, it collapsed to the ground. Ganaris smiled at his brother.
And so it is just us 2 remaining. It is fitting that we should face one another this last time. We will fight with nothing but our bare hands and our stone resolve, and the victor will claim the spoils. How I have waited for this day, Invictus. Ours is a kinship forged in 100 battles, and tempered in the blood of 1,000 vanquished enemies. This will be a battle to end all battles. I am only sorry that we cannot both march forward from here triumphant. But as you know, there can only be one champion.
Invictus nodded in agreement.
I too am sorry, brother,
he said, raising the bolt pistol.
For when I said I had only a single round remaining, I lied.
Gennaris had little time to protest before Invictus squeezed the trigger, sending his brother's brains exploding from the back of his head. Discarding the now empty pistol, Invictus strolled towards the consecrating portal and stepped within the threshold of his glorious light. He stood at the center of a wide carved circle. Ancient sigils intersected one more across its face, eliciting the notion of demonic faces in his mind. But as soon as he tried to focus on them, the faces were gone. Surrounding him on all sides was the faint sparkling of light of a containment shield. Invictus found it hard to imagine what awaited him that would require such a safeguard. There was no way he would flinch in the face of his destiny. Nevertheless, he was not about to question the dictates of Lord Carthal. Lining the periphery of the Great Hall were his brothers, the sons of Malice. Fully regaled in their armor, bearing the standards and livery of the chapter, the sides of the hall rose in tiers, allowing each and every man to view the proceedings. Each would be able to watch as the ceremony took place. Each would see as Invictus was elevated to the ranks of the Doomed Ones. This had never happened before, and Carthal must have deemed his victory in the labyrinth a historic one, to break with tradition in such a way. From the end of the Great Hall, Invictus saw Lord Carthal approaching, flanked by his librarians and their priestly attendants, bedecked in their cerulean robes. Servitors carried the chapter's ancient tomes, and liturgies drowned from the automated vox units that hovered alongside the procession. But there was more. Huge caskets pulled along by the grasping mechadendrites of the chapter's tech marines. What was in these caskets? Invictus had no idea, but something about their unexpected appearance began to fill him with a sense of unease. A huge room filled with the scent of burning incense. A macabre silence seemed to descend upon the proceedings. It was an unnerving quiet, and Invictus's unease began to intensify into a stolid feeling of dread. This was not the exultant ritual he had been anticipating. It was more like a funeral march. As the feeling intensified, Carthal approached him, his stone face grim in the hazy darkness.
You have proven yourself the best among us, Invictus. You have proven that you are without peer for your strength and cunning. You are the most potent, the lightest to prove himself worthy to join the Doomed Ones.
The librarians had surrounded him now, a monotonous chant emanating from their hooded robes. Their ancient dark language was spewed forth by their vox units, as it grew louder and louder with every passing second, and Invictus could feel something metallic on the air. Though a storm were brewing within the confines of the hall, the Czech Marines had positioned their caskets, 10 in all, in a circle around Invictus. They had ceremoniously released the holy seals that bound their locks, and revealed what was inside. 10 blank faces that stared out at Invictus. 10 silent warriors, their bodies still robust, but their minds vacacious. His unease suddenly turned into cold panic. He told himself this was all part of the ritual, that there was nothing to fear, but his base instincts were crying out for him to flee from this place. With the containment field bidding him in place, though, it was impossible.
You are the 11th hero, Invictus, the 11th and final warrior. Look to your battle brothers.
He gestured to the faces that glared at the vacant expressions.
Your predecessors, each one of them succeeding in the challenge of the labyrinth, for the honor of joining the ranks of the Doomed Ones. For 1,000 years, we have searched for champions worthy of him, and tonight, finally you are all assembled. Our crusade can begin now. We will be strong enough to take back what was stolen from us. Seculus, our home world, none will stand in our way. Not the forces of the foul ruinous powers, nor the servants of the Carrion Lord. Not with him by our side.
Terror gripped Invictus as he looked down at the circle beneath his feet. Eldritch lightning was beginning to emanate from the carved runes, dancing and bawling, flashing green, red, and blue.
Now you will learn what it is to be among the Doomed Ones.
Invictus tried to speak, to demand to know what was happening to him, but he found his jaw could not move. The words simply did not come out. The whisper of the barbarians rose, as did the vox units, until they soon reached a crescendo. The light at Invictus' feet grew brighter, lashing upwards to sting his legs and bathe him in its inquictious light.
Now Malice will show you what your victory has wrought. You truly are worthy, Invictus of the Suns.
Invictus follows Carthal's gaze, lifting his head to the ceiling.
Can you hear him calling? He has come to accept you as tribute. Come for the Labyrinth's 11th. Come to walk among us.
Through the shadows he could see the outline of something huge, something that stared down with baleful eyes. Something wicked and dark. He screamed. screamed for the pain that engulfed his body, screamed for the terror in the depths of his soul, but no amount of screaming could halt the ritual now. It began to descend, pulling with the dark at the pain. Invictus raised his voice in a last tumultuous cry as his flesh began to flay from his bones, and his body was consumed. He realized that not even the kindly release of oblivion could save him now. In the great hall, all was silent. The sons had watched as the light consumed the body of their brother Invictus, along with 10 other heroes of the labyrinth, their limbs immolated, their torsos eviscerated, their heads contorting and twisting within a pool of black light. And now what stood before them was no longer their brothers. Invictus and the rest were gone to join the ranks of the legendary doomed ones. What stood before them was the revenant they had worshipped for millennia, the eidolon that would stand at their vanguard as they retook what was rightfully theirs. He could only be summoned by sacrifice. Only giving unto him their best and most praiseworthy warriors could he walk amongst them again. And here he stood, gazing with eyes of fire, the renegade god, the outcast, the lost hierarch of anarchy and terror. So I don't exactly have to tell you why this is very important. Malice, the 5th Chaos God, is in the living world. Now look, I don't have much to add to this, but why does no one talking about this? Malice, a Chaos God, a minor Chaos God mind you, but still a literal Chaos God, is in the material world. Do y'all understand how unfucking precedented that this is? This is madness. This isn't a greater demon. This isn't a demon prince. This is a honest to God, minor chaos god that is in the material world. Now some may argue, oh Brad, surely there are some demon princes like Bellicor that are stronger than him. Maybe. But the fact of the matter is, Malice is considered a minor chaos god, meaning that his power ceiling is far, far above even the likes of Bellicor. And he is out and about in the wider galaxy of the Imperium of a Man, in our living and breathing world, with a whole chapter of Space Marines and their thralls, which are several thousand, mind you, at his direct service and lineage. I do not need to even explain further why this is fucked up, why this is wild, and why this is terrible. Unfortunately, ever since this book was released in 2022, GW has done basically nothing with this, because of course they have. But again, I'm gonna leave this to you guys in the comment section. The minor Chaos God that all the other Chaos Gods agree should die is here. He is alive, he is kicking, and he is ready for a scrap. And worse, he is in our world now, and he thrives off living sacrifices. And I hate to break it to you, cuz there's a lot of living people in this world of ours. But what this will mean for the future, and what this will mean for the rest of us, is highly unknown. While GW may just never talk about this guy ever again, I can imagine that something very big might be happening, now that the hierarch of anarchy and terror walks amongst the living again. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know what y'all think down below. What are your guys' thoughts on Malice? As well as the fight between Asteroth and Jadriel, and the whole Tower of the Flesh Titan nonsense. Love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you guys think that my theories are sound? Do you guys think this lore is wild? And why is it that you think that no one has basically covered all this bullshit? Especially that last one. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching. Even more massive thank you to my awesome members and patrons. Shout out to brand new member, Mr. Simon Kamu, who joined at the private tier. Welcome there, my brother. Hope you enjoy the core. Big shout out to my beautiful officer core, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Big shout out to my starter tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Wolfsmith the Fireheart, Mr. Corns Butcher, Mr. Sean RL7, Mr. Bowen, and Mr. Matthew Merrill. Shout out to my corporal tier members, Mr. Tremeo the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Miss Shauna Smithers, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, and Mr. Rambling Hamster. And finally, but absolutely certainly not least, big shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Michael Hader, Mr. Tori's Curse, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Vortis Unum, Mr. Gentle Salamander, the Winch of Warhammer, and Mr. CMD Nay. Thank you, each and every one of you. So join up today with our memberships. You get a bunch of access to awesome benefits behind the scenes stuff, early access to videos, handy making the channel run, and first dibs on anything new that happens. But remember, this will always be free, so whether you join or not, whether you give your boy a dollar or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I have been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Y'all make sure to stay strong out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! Like, I'm sorry, a Chaos God is out about walking on the fucking world. Yo, the Imperium is cooked. Everyone is cooked, bro. This shit is wild.